In certain circumstances, a UHF aerial by itself may not be sufficiently powerful to draw in a clear signal, and in such circumstances it's necessary to use a UHF aerial in conjunction with a UHF masthead amplifier and a power unit. And the purpose of the power unit is it provides either a 12 or 24 volt voltage to the masthead amplifier, which amplifies the aerial. So what will actually happen is that if you put your hand to an amplified aerial, it's actually full of static electricity. So instead of trying to boost an existing signal as a distribution system would do, it actually pulls in a far stronger signal. And to that extent, it can be very, very successful. Now, the one downside of it is that if there's a lot of interference in the area, it can pull in the extra interference. And indeed, if you have an extremely clear signal to start with, amplifying a UHF aerial can actually make the situation worse, where if you had no amplification, it might have worked. So use with caution, but having said that, they're an essential tool for any professional aerial and satellite installer. Now, in this particular example here, I'm going to use a grid UHF aerial. You could also similarly use a UHF wideband aerial, which I'll just show you. We're having it monitored on another pole. It's a top aerial shown here. So this is a much smaller, simpler aerial. They both do effectively the same job, but I won't go the ins and outs, but the grid is the example we're using here, which is another UHF aerial. Now, in terms of the actual masthead amplifier itself, this is the masthead amplifier here. It consists of two cables, one in, one out. So we feed an aerial on the in coming from the power unit, and another aerial on the out coming from the masthead amplifier, or coming from the aerial itself. So this cover clips off like that. So how we go about wiring this is quite simple. With a diplexer, for instance, the length of the cable is not overly important, but with a masthead amplifier it's extremely important. You want the cable to be about 1 or 2 meters to get the proper level of amplification. Any closer or any further away, it will be less effective. So what we do now is we use a snips to remove the outer cable for about the first 20 millimeters of this cable. We pare down the cable by putting in cuts at 90 degrees to the original loop around, and then we pare down the cable. We also grab the braided wire and wrap it around the cable. Next we come along and get the snips, we remove the unwanted foil, and we also pare down the white foam here. Or we pare down the white foam, twist it off, leaving 6 or 7 millimeters of a gap. The white foam forms a barrier between the core wire and the earth wire, which I have in my hand here. Okay, the next step. The two tools we need for this job is one is a screwdriver and the other is a sharp set of snips, which is an essential tool for any satellite installer. So we come along now, and we'll take the cover off hopefully at this point in time, and we will loosen off the saddle and clamp mechanisms. So there's two locking mechanisms here. One is for the core wire and one is for the earth wire. Okay, so what we're going to do here is that we feed the aerial into the in slot, and the out section will feed down into the power unit. So you can see this is working its way in. It's successful now because we have the core wires in the center here, and we can lock it into position. And that level of overhang is acceptable. You can snip off that extra wire if you want and snip it here, but in this case I'll just leave it at that. And now I'm going to lock in this locking mechanism here, and it's essential that the earth wire on the outside is being cut on that particular cable. So that's working quite well for me. Now I'll repeat the process on the outside. Now on the far end of this wire, it could be the far side of a splitter or a considerable length of cable, we will have a power unit that will be used to power this masthead amplifier. So what I do now is I just reduce this for a second. I pick up a cable. I actually have here a cable that I had pared down at an earlier point in the day, and now it's not ideal. I'm just going to pare it down a little bit more around to expose, we'll say, a sufficient length of core wire in the centre. So what we have here then once again, this is quite good now because we have a certain amount of core wire with the earth wire further back and a clearer white space in between. So that's not a major, that looks like it'll work quite well for us. We simply push this cable through, a little bit of brute force perhaps needed, and then we have a success again. We have the earth wire mounted in the centre, or core wire mounted in the centre, and then we'll have to use the 2 side screws to mount this in here. Now, that's sufficiently locked down into position now to be a success. So we have both wires securely mounted. Now we'll put this cover back on at this point. And that's it, locked in position. Now, what way to face this? In reality, you can probably face this anywhere, but the recommendation generally is that we come along and we lock this in a situation where we tighten this lead in and it's at 180 degrees. It's facing 180 degrees the way the aerial is at the front, and we'd use a tie wrap then, tie wrap the cable here and here down along, and run this cable from here all the way into the attic, where at some point either directly it feeds into a power unit, or from there it will feed to a living room which has a power unit on it. Okay, and that's a UHF masthead amplifier installed from beginning to end.